Good morning, everybody. My name is Czajka. I am a support services operations director with Advocate Health. I've got about 15 or so years in the HTM field, and I want to welcome you to my presentation, Adding to the Toolbox, Tips to Grow into a Better Leader. My goal with this presentation today is to share some of the insights and wisdom I've picked up over my years as both a technician and a leader, so that you can take some of that back and use it in your day-to-day activities. First, I want to thank MD Publishing for this wonderful presentation layout. I am not an artistic person. I'm a technical person by trade, so they did a really good job of making it festive. Love it. Quick question for the folks in the room. How many people are current leaders? Ooh, almost everybody. And the rest are you on the frontline technician, something like that? Yeah, cool. Good, nice little mix. So I'll start out with our agenda today. I'm going to start out by talking about my journey. How did I get from, college kid to where I'm at today? Next, I want to talk about connections, mentors, tool time, which is going to be the bread and butter of the presentation, professionalism, email etiquette, and finally your journey. Where are you going to go moving forward? So starting with my career, I went to DeVry University for a bachelor's in electronic engineering, and all I knew at the time was that I wanted to do something with computers, because that's all I knew. There was no biomed. I didn't know biomed even existed. So I went to DeVry. I was graduating, and the recruiters at the school came up to the incoming grads and said, "Hey, we have a person from Loyola University Medical Center. He's a director. He's coming in to interview graduates for a potential position. And your degree lines up with that. You should go talk to them." I said, okay. So before I met with this gentleman, they give us a job description. And so I'm reading through this job description, and I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever read. Because if anyone's ever read through some of those professional job descriptions, usually in the latter half of it, they kind of put some of the HR stuff, essentially saying you need to be an able-bodied person in order to do this job. So it's like you need to be able to stand, sit, crouch, crawl, kneel, use your hands, things like that. And it was just when I read that, I was 21 years old, so I was kind of a goofball. I'm like, oh, this is so goofy. But whatever. So I went into this interview, and I sit down, and I'm still going to give it a college effort, no pun intended. But I kind of went into it a little bit half-assed because I was like, we'll see what happens. Well, lucky for me, at the end of the interview, he's like, oh, I'd like to have another, why don't you come to the site? We'll, meet the team, stuff like that. Wow. So fast forward a little bit, I do my second interview, everything kind of goes well, and I end up getting my job. So I was biomed at the hospital I was working at. They didn't have like biomed 1, 2, 3. It was a union shop, so everyone was just biomed, BMed. So I worked there. I was there for 4.5 years working out of the operating room. During that time, I had started to get these ideas that I'm like, you know what? Eventually, I would like to go into leadership. I'm not ready now, but down the line, that's what I want to do. So I enrolled at Keller University, which is DeVry's sister school, and they have graduate programs, MBAs, and stuff like that. So I went and got an MBA, and when I was getting ready to go to that school, I wasn't sure if should I go for like a master's in electronics or the other side, the business side. And honestly, the MBA sounded a little bit easier, but in the end, that's what a leader would probably be needing more technical skills. So I went to Keller, got my MBA, and just kind of held that in my back pocket, knowing that eventually this is going to pay its dividends. So after working at Loyola for 4.5 years, I got hired at Advocate Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn, Illinois, which is in the South Chicago suburbs, and I got moved in there as a BMed 3. I worked there for 5.5 years, again, staying in the OR, but expanding a little bit beyond just that. I did some ICU, labor and delivery, those kind of, say, higher end, not the general floors so much. I had a really good time doing that. I love my job. It was fantastic. While I was in that role, I wanted to continue growing myself and like, well, what way can I do this? What can I do to prove that I know what I'm talking about? That's where I decided I'm gonna go get my CBET. I'm like, that's like just a nice little thing to put on the resume. I love having the little letters after my name. So I, connected with Amy, got the training or in the test, and actually at one of the regional associations, they had Larry Fennigo, he was here yesterday, he's probably here floating around today. He did a 2-day seminar at that conference, and he was kind of going over everything that you needed for the CBET in order, like, because if anyone listened to his presentation yesterday, he knows all the cardiology stuff. And so he did like a 2-day crash course on CBET. Well, like the week after that, I took my CBET and managed to pass, and I'm just thrilled with that. It was really nice to have that. So after I worked at as a BMET for now 10 years of experience, this is where I'm getting to the point. I'm like around 30 years old. I want to make that next step. But anyone here that's a leader knows it's not easy to break from being a technician to being a leader. It's like you could apply for it, but without any background experience, it can be really challenging to get into that kind of role. So what do? Well, in my case, I'm like, well, what if I move into a corporate type position as a clinical engineer? Because now I already know all the front end stuff. I know how to turn the wrench and fix the equipment, but I need to know how does the financials, the contracts, and all that stuff work without actually having to worry about managing people. So an opportunity presented itself in my organization for an opening as a clinical engineer. I applied, I got that, and I stayed in that role for 16 months. And that was fantastic to meet new people, see a whole nother side of the organization that I would have never otherwise gotten to see. After that, that's when my first big break came in. A supervisor position opened, again, within my same organization. And my then VP is like, Greg, I know you want to keep moving, and this would be a good one. It's like a medium-sized site. You got about 7 techs. This is a great way to get your feet wet as a leader without throwing you in the deep end. So I took this position as an HCM supervisor at Advocate Good Samaritan Hospital, and exactly as he said, it was great. It was a good team. There's always a few challenges, but in general, it was a way to get my feet wet into the world of being a leader, a true leader. So after being there and doing, according to my boss, really, really great job, another opportunity presented itself in my organization as the manager at one of our flagship sites at McHugh Christ Medical Center. And, I jumped at that opportunity. Plus that hospital is 5 minutes from my house. So, having no commute is just absolutely amazing. So I took on the HCM manager role, and I was in that for about 2 years, almost at the day. While I was doing that role, again, I wanted to see what I could do to elevate myself above the rest, both just for my own self-gratification and just because it's something nice to have. So that's when I applied and got and started getting my CHTM, Certified Healthcare Technology Manager, because I feel like that was the next logical step in progression. At that point, I didn't see any more reason to go back to like formal school. Like I've considered maybe, do I want to get like a doctorate or another master's in something? But every time I started going down that path, I said, what benefit is this going to bring me in my role? And I see you shaking your head because at that point, there's not really any PhD biomed directors, VPs out there. And if you have it, it's probably overkill. So I went and got my CHTM, and I feel like how many people here have the CBET? Oh, half the room, nice. And how many people here have a CHTM? One. Did you find that one to be easier or harder than the CBET?
I would say it was along the same line, easier a little bit, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of what I felt too. I feel like I didn't have to study as much and just kind of went into it. And it was a lot more common sense type approach as opposed to like the CBET, which was a lot more technical stuff. It's like, oh, I haven't touched dialysis in a while. I got to go remember how dialysis works, right? So I was the manager. I got my CHTM, and everything was just going swimmingly. And then last but not least, a new opportunity opened in my organization for a support services operations director role, which is where I'm at now. Now, this one was a little bit different because this is actually outside of HTM. I'm not in HTM right now, but this role was what I still consider a stepping stone into where do I want to go. You know, my current goal is I want to be a VP of operations or a president of a hospital. I have these aspirations out there, but how do I get there? And all these little steps is what's leading me to get into that role. And it's just a matter of time, experience, and that opportunity presenting itself. So this is where I'm at now. Actually, just hit my 18 months or so, a week or so ago, and I'm enjoying what I do. But it is very, very different from being in HDM. So next, I want to talk about connections. Connections I see as I see them as a pivotal way of growing your career. So there's a couple of ways I kind of break this down. First, I talk about within your organization. What I mean by that is talking to the people who you work with on that day-to-day basis. I like to say, be a social butterfly, which is probably the opposite of what most people in the room here are, because we're HTM. We want to turn the wrench and don't talk to me, I'll fix it and send it back to you, right? But that is what's going to help propel your career. It's just little baby steps. It's not the defining moment, but every little bit helps. I recommend talking to people in all the units of your site. Don't just talk to your team or the IT manager. Get to know the nurse managers, get to know unit coordinators, the nurses or other techs that you see in the day-to-day, the folks in EVS, anybody that you cross paths with. It's a good person, there are good people to meet and talk and introduce yourselves and get to know them on a first name basis. Second, LinkedIn. Anybody that follows me on LinkedIn sees that I like to be pretty active. It's my only social media. I don't do Facebook or anything like that. And so that's where I do most of my postings and stuff like that. And I recommend making connections with people on LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn already, go make one. Especially for if you're coming to events like this is a great place to start adding those connections. Next are the regional and national associations. So one other thing I didn't mention in my kind of career path is I got connected with, I'm out of Chicago area. I got connected with the regional association there, the Clinical Engineering Association of Illinois, which is, for anyone that's not really familiar with like regional associations, they're kind of like MDX. So MDX goes like the national level, and then there's the regional ones pocketed throughout the United States. Not every state has one, and some of them like group them. Like I know like New England has like a bunch of states that kind of come together for it. Texas has like 2 or 3. California's got a bunch because they're so large. But I got kind of involved with that. I started by just going to the conferences the way you guys are all coming here today. And then eventually they have elections every couple of years. So I threw my name in the hat. I got myself put in as one of the 4 leaders as a treasurer, and then kind of moved my way. I'm currently the vice president of that organization. And I kind of help plan the conferences just like MD Expo, except it's all volunteer and there's only 4 of us doing it, so it's a lot of work. But getting back to that, those associations and those types of conferences or chapter meetings, if your associations have those are great ways to meet people and talk to people and get connected on LinkedIn as well. AMI, if anyone ever has gone to the AMI annual conference, I went to it once in San Jose last year, but they have a big conference just like this, and the Expo, of course. And then, how many people here have heard of Project Cure? 1. So Project Cure, I'm trying to kind of integrate them a little bit more with the HTM field. So they are a international nonprofit that helps take medical supplies and equipment from like the US and bring them to third world countries that need them the most. So they have this whole operation where they'll ship stuff out, and they've got like they've got a warehouse kind of nearby my house that periodically they'll call upon biomeds to come volunteer their time to help fix some of the equipment or validate that it works before they ship it out. They don't want to ship an old anesthesia machine if it doesn't work or it has no vaporizers or it's got a blown hose in it or something. So We've been coordinating with them for a volunteer day actually later this week. But that's another way of kind of getting connections out there, and plus it puts it's real nice to do on one hand and then just a little on a resume as well. And then lastly, people in the industry. Those are people that you meet here at this event. If you've attended, people's presentations yesterday or the ones that you'll watch later today, I encourage you to find them on LinkedIn and go connect with them. It'll just get your name out there, and you'll get to know some of these people too. And that's actually one of the big ways on how I got to where I'm at right now, standing in front of this podium, is I started coming to these events, started connecting with people, I started, just finding those big players. If anyone saw my post yesterday, I took a bunch of pictures with like some of the big names out there. And that's it's really, really helpful to do. So next. So next I want to talk about mentors. Mentors they can be anybody that you interact with. They're not limited to just your boss. I have so many mentors in my life, and I pick little pieces out of each one of them that I think they do the right way, and I try to adopt that or incorporate that into how I act as a leader and how I go about my day. So who are they? In my case, I've got my direct bosses, nursing directors, VPs of operations, site presidents that I've known, fellow HTM managers and supervisors, my personal trainer, HTM leaders outside the organization, like a lot of you here today, even people that don't report to me. Sometimes people will teach me something and they don't even realize it, and it's something I still just kind of grasp onto. I don't see any of my peers in the audience today. I wanted to call them out, but I guess they didn't want to come to my presentation. That's okay. No harm done. So what can you learn from them? Pay attention to how others present themselves. This I found is especially noticeable if you're in a meeting with like senior leaders. So, so I'm a remote worker now in my current role. So a lot of my day is on, meetings and emails, right? I don't go on site very often, or if I do, just don't get that opportunity that often. So when I am on these calls, and especially when I'm with VPs or other high-level executives, I watch how they talk, how they sit, how all those little minute details, which you might not realize. If you're sitting there slumped like this, with your arms crossed, we've all learned this before. It sends like kind of a negative message. I'm not interested. I'm not paying attention. Your time isn't worth mine, right? So kind of just be aware of what other people are doing. And more importantly, learn what not to do. And I use that as probably the bigger teaching moment. It comes from, my parents, other leaders. When I see mistakes being made, in the organization, I go, I'm not going to do that. I'm never going to make that mistake. I find more lessons to be had about what not to do than what to do. So what can you do as a mentor? Never hold somebody back from their potential, even if it means losing a great employee. How many of the leaders here have ever had a great employee leave? Went for another opportunity. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks. Like, wow, they were holding that whole department together, and now what are we going to do? Now we have to get new training, find another person, and are they going to be as good as the last one? There's just so much lost time and cost and everything like that. But if you hold somebody back, like, let's say your tech wants to leave and go to another organization, or maybe leave your department and go to another hospital within your org, and you put in a bad word, say, you know what, Greg's he's not a great tech, you shouldn't take him, you got to leave him here with me, or anything like that, you're going to lose all the respect that person had for you, and they're probably going to leave anyway. There's not really much you can do in that case. I mean, counter offers, stuff like that's another thing, but I mean more of like that mental side of it. So I've had bosses, I've never had a boss hold me back, even if it meant leaving them because they knew it was better for my career growth. And again, it'll pay dividends. You know, we have a very small field, HTM, even in this whole country and MD Expo and beyond. You know, you are going to see these people again. You do not want to ever burn bridges. Don't bad talk anyone, because you know you get a bad name or bad rap, and you're gonna have a bad time. And then lastly, admit your own shortcomings, which for some people can be hard. Some people don't want to ever think they're wrong, but we are all wrong for, you know, all the time, right? One thing as a leader I've learned to do is be the first to admit, yeah, I made a mistake. That was my bad. You know what? It's better. I think it shows better. You get more respect from your team when you don't think that you are, you know, the mighty, almighty person saying, you know, I don't make mistakes. So, tool time. Let's talk about some of the big things that I've picked up along my way. And some of these were hard for me to learn, but I think at the end of the day, they made me a better leader. So the first one is learn that there is more than one way to get things done. And the way that you might ask your tech to go do something or a project or a repair might not be the way you would do it. And you have to accept that as long as the job is getting done and it's safe and they're following the protocols, that you don't want to micromanage and nitpick how they're doing it. You know, I had an example where I asked, we were getting in like 20 new ESUs. We needed all unboxed, tagged, tested, inventory to get ready to go out into the OR. Well, I asked, you know, a couple of my techs to do it along with myself. But you know, one of my techs, when he was doing it, I'm just like, almost like, oh, that's not the way I would do it. I didn't like the way he was, you know, doing the cardboard or putting the stickers on a little crooked, you know, little nitpicks like that. And while I would love to have the stickers on perfectly even at the exact same spot, at the end of the day, is it still tagged, inventory, tested, functional? Yes. Just let them do it. Secondly, never let your foot off the gas when it comes to leading your team. Teammate engagement that was one of the hardest aspects for me of being a leader, is having different personalities and people that just do their own thing their own way. When I was a supervisor, I had 7 reports. I had 5 biomed, 2 imaging, and then when I moved into the manager role, I had 18 people. I had 14 biomeds, 3 imaging, and I had a radon specialist. And you know, different age brackets, different generations, different skill sets, and just it was hard. I always say that was the hardest part of my job, because the human resources aspect is something that is difficult to change. You know, if you have a tech that doesn't really want to work that hard and they just want to get their 8 hours and go home, I mean, what can you do compared to, you know, your star athlete that, you know, gets all their PMs done early and then they go out and help others? You know, that's very difficult. Thirdly is be the resource for your team. Learn about what they're working on so you can be the resource in case they get stuck. And this could be challenging depending on your background as an HTM leader. I did a presentation a couple of years ago with another HTM director, but compared to, like, I was a tech, then I moved up into a leadership role, whereas he did the education. He got his degrees, and then he did through his company, got put into a leadership role without having to, you know, be that front line turning the wrench. So his skill set was different than mine, and that's going to might be a little bit harder. But one thing that I liked to do when I was a leader was know what the techs are doing, because they can get stuck sometimes and they need help, and then maybe their other teammates aren't around. That's where I could come in and help them troubleshoot the issue. I wanted to get my hands on everything. I was a very hands-on leader in that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I was a very hands-on leader, and one thing that I had learned was that I didn't know a lot of things about a lot of things. My background was OR, ICU, and sterile processing, that kind of area. But I didn't know squat about nurse call, dialysis, imaging, lab. So those are all areas where when I moved into those leadership roles and my team had struggles, I'm like, I don't know how to help you besides get my hands dirty and go try to learn it with them. So I would go on calls with them sometimes and we could learn it together. And that made me a better leader because then I was able to absorb that and I learned a little bit more about how dialysis works or the problems they're having with imaging and detectors and drops and all that kind of stuff. So I encourage you to learn everything you can about everything you can. More knowledge is never going to be a downside. Next is attitude. I find attitude to be extremely important as well for your team. No one wants a grumpy boss. No one wants someone that's coming in and naysaying, saying, oh, I just got some crappy email, today's gonna suck. I always went in with, positive attitude and kind of like what my earlier step is about not letting off the gas. You kind of have to do that with your attitude as well. We all have bad days too, where we don't want to go to work, or maybe we had some bad stuff going on at home and we still need to come into the office. And you need to be able to kind of compartmentalize that. Put the bad stuff aside, and you got to be that face of the team so that they can kind of absorb that. I like to say it's kind of infectious. If you're smiling and say, this is going to be a great day today, come on guys, then other people are going to latch onto that and it kind of just snowballs from there. I like to say, bring a glass half full into my world. And then even if you do get something bad, or nurse call went down, and it's 3:30 in the afternoon, so guess who's staying today, right? Spin it. This is a challenge, but this is an opportunity. Spin things so that it's not just this sucks. How can we make this better? How can we learn from this and get things better? And then lastly, participate, which I kind of talked about a little bit before. I say, participate, especially when there's a project that needs a lot of hands. When I was working at Christ, huge hospital, lots of equipment coming and going. Your team isn't going to respect as much if you're just directing at them from the office and never leaving your office. Be hands-on, be willing to get your hands dirty. I was not above pushing the gondola full of garbage from the shop full of cardboard and whatever, all the way to, the compactor where it needs to go, because it's the right thing to do. It's what the team needs to happen so that they can keep doing their work. It helps you learn a little bit more, helps you build that camaraderie, and they see you as more of an equal. And then last, assume positive intent. That's something that I still have to remind myself of in my day-to-day as I deal with other parts of the organization. I deal with IT a lot. I deal with human resources, finance, and sometimes a decision is made that it just baffles you. Why would they do this? Why is it being done this way? There's a reason, and you have to assume everybody's going to work today to do the best job that they can do. It might not meet your expectations, but people are trying to do good. No one's coming to work and say, I'm going to really screw things up today just so it's harder on biomed. No one's doing that. Next, I want to talk about professionalism. First, most importantly, get a good headshot. I talked a little bit about creating or updating your LinkedIn profile. That's extremely important too. Put your headshot on it. Don't, you know, when I do my my conferences for my regional, the last 2 years we've had a professional photographer come in and free of charge for all the members that want to get a free headshot. Just use it, and that's actually what the one you're looking at there is. And I'm like, oh, that was nice. But it really does stand out when people have, you know, a selfie with bad lighting and glare, or they're not wearing, you know, a professional attire compared to, you know, a nice, well done headshot. You can go get them at probably like Kohl's or something like that, but get a good headshot. It's important. And so you have your LinkedIn, and remember, this is also super key. LinkedIn is not Facebook. Don't post your personal stuff. Keep it professional. No one wants to hear your BS about kids or your dog or da 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 da. I find, you know, keeping the two separate and focusing on the business, the work, the professional development is the way to go with LinkedIn. Lastly, don't be accusatory. Choose your words. You know, when you place blame on somebody, you're never going to get the results that you want. This will tie in a little bit into my later presentation, but when you need something done, you know, you catch more flies with honey kind of thing, you know, don't say, well, this is screwed up because of you, or, you know, you messed this up. It just doesn't go over well, and you're not going to get the results that you want. So this slide here, consider your behavior. I lifted this from my organization's annual ethics training because it had such an impact on my time as a leader. This is something that we kind of went through, and I actually have this printed out and posted on the wall in front of my desk because of how much it reminds me to do the right thing. So first, if you're doing what's right, you'll be able to answer yes to every single one of these questions. Am I being honest and truthful? Am I acting fairly? Am I acting in the best interest of my organization and our patients? Would I be proud to tell my family about my actions? Is it consistent with the law and my organization's policies? And my favorite one, would I be okay with seeing my actions reported on the TV news? Whenever I'm making a decision, I kind of go through these and say, is this the right thing to do? I love that last one. Would I be okay with it being shown on the news? Thinking about like when I was getting my hands dirty and helping my team out, maybe with a PM or a repair or something like that. And then, you know, it comes to that point where like, do I really need to do the safety check on this? Or it looks fine, I could put it back in service. Or, you know, something needs to get, you know, brought back up to the floor, and, you know, you need to go pull out the test equipment to do a function check when it's a pulse oximeter, it works or it doesn't, right? Do the right thing. Get the test equipment, do the safety check, you know, throw the stuff out in the correct garbage or recycle, you know. And I have another one I kind of added on here, but I didn't write on the slide, is don't be lazy. Don't be lazy. Because if you are going to cut corners, that's going to make it okay for your team to cut corners. Email etiquette is what I live and breathe every day right now. You know, in my role, again, I do emails all day long because that's just kind of how my job works. And one of the biggest frustrations I have is, and I'm sure a lot of you have this too, is when you send an email and it goes nowhere, no response, no reciprocation, and you have to keep nudging and probing to try to get a response in order for you to do your work or move the project along. So what I want to talk a little bit of this slide is how to send a good professional email. So number one, don't make emails too wordy. If you've ever gotten an email with 3 or 4 paragraphs, guarantee no one's reading that whole thing, right? Keep it short, keep it sweet, keep it to the point, keep it succinct. And that can be hard when you are maybe used to over communicating. On the flip side, don't make them too short, right? There's a sweet spot in here, because if you send something with not enough information, then you're just adding to the time, because now the person's gonna have to respond back and get more information or get clarification. Next, buzzwords in corporate lingo. Who loves buzzwords in corporate lingo? I always start my emails now. I've moved to good morning or good afternoon, depending on time of day. The reason I do this is I had an experience a few years ago where I got an email like 7 o'clock at night from a vendor that we were using for a project. And this vendor had sent me like a new quote or something that I had asked for earlier in the day. And so I responded to it. My boss was copied on it. And I go, hey, Kelly, blah, blah, blah. Thanks for the quote. I'll follow up with it tomorrow, something like that. And my boss had actually said, like, he responded pretty quickly, which kind of cut me the wrong way. But he said, hey, don't use the word hey, because it was like too casual. And I was a little peeved on this, because I'm like, well, I've known this vendor for like years and we talk all the time. And even if that wasn't the right way of doing it, it's still something that impacted me and, changed my way of thinking. And so I moved away from saying hey in an email. I might do it in like a Teams chat, because I chat with people all the time, which is a little bit different, I think. But for starting my emails, good morning, afternoon, I like to say, I'm following up on this. Or if you ever heard of pulse check, doing a pulse check, basically you haven't responded and I need an answer. I want to see if you're still out there or alive or got this email. When you get an email from someone and they try to answer, but they don't give you the answer that you need, you need clarification. And instead of saying like, what do you mean by that? It can come across a little bit too sharp, a little bit too accusatory. So say, instead of saying that, say, I'm having difficulty understanding, or can you clarify? That comes across a little bit smoother, a little bit nicer, and you're more likely to get a response that isn't somebody being like, well, you should have figured it out, you should have known, that kind of stuff, right? Be thankful. I get emails and where it's like, I asked for something and it took them a week to finally get it when it should have taken 20 minutes. I still always end the email with some kind of thanks. Thanks for sending that out. Thanks for getting this over. I appreciate it. I'm very big on saying I appreciate things, because I really do. I'm not being like insincere. I do appreciate when somebody helps me out by sending the information I need or whatever. But it does come across as very professional and very polite. And again, it helps you build relationships, even with people who, you might be at odds within the workplace. The use of we. So this is a strange one. I don't know how many people do this, but I found it helps, again, to soften the blow. So instead of saying, I need this, I think that, I always say we, because it's usually referring to like, me and my department need this, or me and my team need this. So I use it almost exclusively at this point. And I think it helps, like, well, if you send this over, then we'll be able to continue doing our work, right? I really like the use of we. Big one, be timely. Be timely, respond to emails within, there's not a hard, amount of time that it should take to respond to something. You might be out of the office or busy with a project all day. I think the general consensus last time I asked the audience was like 24 to 48 hours, depending on the urgency of the email. Use the high priority button if that helps to get something across that you need an answer to now. But don't be the person that needs to nudge. I mentioned this earlier, is that one of the biggest challenges I have now is sending emails and they just go into the void. And I'm like, come on, I can't progress until you tell me what I need to know. And it's even harder when you're working with other departments. Like you might be working with people on your team, so it's tech to leader. But if you're dealing with human resources or finance or IT, they might answer things on their own time. Lastly, on this one is a big one, is pause and proofread. Don't be the person that needs, when you get an email, pause and let the information sink in. Don't send knee-jerk responses. What I mean by that is if you get an email and you're like, what the, why would, and then you just immediately want to respond and say, I already sent that to you, or whatever, stop, disconnect for a second, and think about how you're going to think about that the next day. Like, I just told that guy off, and it made me look unprofessional, and it's not going to help build this relationship with this person who we might already be rocky with. Just take a breath, go do something else, and come back in 5 or 10 minutes, and then think about how you'd want to word that email. This is where sometimes maybe a little bit of insincerity comes in, where it's like you get that, instead of sending the knee-jerk response like, oh, thank you for sending this over, I appreciate it. I do that sometimes because it's not going to make me look unprofessional. So I want to talk next about your journey. Where are you going to go? Ask yourself, what do you think of as your plateau? So let's do a quick audience check here. So for the folks in the room that were technicians right now, how many of you want to move into, how many of you are technicians again? Hands up. Okay, how many of you want to move into like a leadership role or something outside of literally turning the wrench? Most of you. Do you know how you're going to get there? Do you know what you want to do? If you're a tech right now, do you want to be a supervisor at your site or a manager at your site, or do you want to keep climbing that corporate ladder the way I'm trying to do it in my own world? I want to be a director, I want to be a VP or a president. Maybe lay that out for yourself and think, how are you going to get, it's like eating an elephant, right? Like, how are you going to do it? One step at a time, one bite at a time. And think about how you would want to get to that end position. And that's what I did when I was in, I went and got my MBA because I knew that would help me get to where I wanted to go. I went and got my CBET, my CHTM, all these little steps. And while I was also learning and growing and trying to improve myself, getting involved with organizations, coming to MD Expo, going to Amy, all these little things are steps that are going to move you in that direction. And the other question kind of to ask yourself is, what is your plateau? Where do you see, like some people, I've had technicians that they've peaked. They cannot improve on themselves because they have decided they cannot get any better. And it kind of ties in with the keynote speaker from yesterday, where he said, like, he had that quote about like, you can or you can't if you think about it. It's the same thing. I've had a tech 2 or a tech 3 that's as good as they're getting, and they don't want to go to leadership, but they also are never going to be that perfect star biomed tech. There's going to be people who are younger or newer that are already surpassing them because that younger or newer person has decided that they don't have a limit, they don't have a ceiling. Continual improvement. Leadership is about continual improvement, and you're going to be hard pressed to find any organization that says we're good enough right now, right? Does anybody work for a hospital that says patient safety, we're good where we're at, we don't need to get to serious safety events? We did it, guys. Exactly. You always want to keep bettering yourself and don't let yourself plateau. You might, and when I say about plateauing, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to keep moving up in the corporate ranks. Like you can be a biomed tech and just keep getting better as biomed tech so that you learn a little bit more, like what I did. I learned about dialysis and imaging and labs and stuff that I had never touched because it made me better. Even if it's not my department and I'm not going to be doing it every day, just being familiar with it, to know, to be able to sound like you know what you're talking about, fake it till you make it sort of thing. Because when you're an HTM leader, you know, you're dealing with managers from all these departments, and they're going to ask you questions and expect that you know what you're talking about, even if you've never fixed that piece of equipment in your life or touched it in your life. You know, it's got to be a bigger challenge for, like, you know, the operating room, which is my, you know, my background. There's so many different types of devices that are only in the OR, and you've probably got OR techs that touch them, but nobody else sees them. And if you never worked OR, you never touched them either. So you're relying on the knowledge of your team to help acclimate you, and that's kind of what you had to do. Put yourself out there. Do things that are scary. It's okay to fail as long as you learn from your mistakes. Nobody's perfect. An honest example is in part of why I'm presenting today. I want to become a better public speaker because that will help me in my roles, current and future, of having to deal with presidents and executives. I need to be able to have what my boss said, I need to work on my executive presence. Don't have it yet. It's a work in progress, and it's not going to happen overnight, but you get it by practicing and making mistakes. And you know, it's scary. No one most people don't like public speaking, but the only way to do it, the only way to get better is by doing it.